Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show. That I want to start with a couple of questions. Do you ever agree to things or say yes to something that you really would rather say no to, but you just don't know how to say no? Or do you, when you're annoyed, say something is fine, sort of with more heat than you need to, really sounding like things are not fine, rather than just saying what's on your mind or what's bothering you? If you're nodding your head yes, there's a certain amount of expectation that is in those scenarios that the other people will know what we really mean, right? Or that they will, can't they tell? If I say it with this attitude, then they can tell. So part of what we're going to be talking about in today's episode is how to be more authentic and more truthful in setting boundaries or setting limits or telling the truth about how we feel about something. But in the process of doing that, we're also going to be managing expectations. So I'm going to cover the common reasons why it's hard to speak our mind if we think someone else won't like it. And then I'm going to talk about a bunch of things that you can do to start being more authentic in your communication. So if you happen to be, you just fell onto this YouTube channel and you don't know who I am, my name is Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert. I'm the author of Boundary Boss, the Boundary Boss Workbook, and my new book, Too Much, a guide to breaking the cycle of high-functioning codependency, which you can get at hfcbook.com. And you can still get all of the bonuses that go along with my high-functioning codependency book. So don't miss that. Go to hfcbook.com. If you happen to be new here, please make sure that you subscribe, make sure you hit the bell so that you get notified every time I do something new, which is every Tuesday and every Thursday. So I got lots of new stuff rolling out. And since I do it for you, I would love it if you would subscribe, because it actually helps me if you subscribe to the channel. It tells YouTube that it's a popular channel and that people like what I'm doing, which is great. I also really appreciate all of your questions and all of your comments that you guys always leave for me. You know, I read everything. So this is from Amy McDaniel, Reflections on Aging Well, Beauty, Health, Societal Standards, and More. That was the video. And she said, I listened to Boundary Boss on Audible, and I'm currently working with the workbook. I feel hopeful knowing what I can do now. I didn't even realize what was happening. At 48, I'm so thankful I found your work and something that is making a difference in my life and those around me. It feels like a really big mountain to climb, but at least I have some direction now. Well, Amy, I want to say thanks. Thank you for leaving that note. It really makes me happy to know that the content is helping you. This is literally exactly why I do it. All right, let's move it on into today's content. So, why is it hard? Why is it hard? You all know that it can be difficult for you, but why is it hard to assert our real feelings? Well, there's fear. Right? There's fear of what other people will think. Will people perceive me as greedy? There's fear of rejection. Here's the reason why we need to care, is that speaking truthfully in our relationships is the only way to create the life and the relationships that you want and that you deserve. Right? So, and don't worry, I'm going to be sharing some scripts with you in the guide that goes along with today's episode. You can get that at terricole.com/guide. But before we get into scripts and sort of the what can I do about it, I really think it's important that we talk about why do we avoid speaking up? What is it that stops us? Well, a lot of it is learned behavior. So if you came from a long line of people pleasers, that could definitely be part of it. If it's what you saw in your family of origin, that to be polite, you shouldn't assert yourself, or that it's rude to assert yourself. So there's certainly some downloaded blueprint stuff around where we learn it, especially depending on the culture and the country and the family norms that you come from. Again, in this country, you know, I wrote about this in Boundary Boss. In the South, in the U.S., you know, this is like a different language when it comes to being passive-aggressive around things. Everyone knows this, you know, it's sort of like a trope that if someone from the South says, oh, bless his heart, that they're really not blessing anybody. that's akin to saying he's an idiot or he's a mess or he's a jerk. But everyone knows it's a shorthand for that. And what do they get to avoid? Talking true. By saying, bless his heart, and everybody knowing the shorthand, you get to not actually say what you're saying. So part of the problem with not saying what you're saying or saying yes when you want to say no, agreeing to crap you don't want to do, not setting limits, is that there's unclear expectations in your relationships on both sides. Like, everyone's confused. If you're doing things that you don't want to do or not speaking up about it, and then you feel resentful about it, a lot of times this is very confusing to the people in your life. They don't really get why you're acting that way or feeling that way because you're not telling them. So, I mean, the confusion is real, and I get it. When you think about why else we don't tell the truth, is that we don't want to be judged. Right? Especially if you're a people pleaser. And many of you, I know, if you identify as a high-functioning codependent, many of you also are people pleasers. I mean, think about what we learned in childhood. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all, which would mean if I need to say no to you, that's probably not saying something nice, I shouldn't say it. So I think that home training really runs deep. You know what I mean? And there's an expectation from other people that we will be nice above all other things, especially if you were raised as a woman. So, moving into what can we do? Well, listen, obviously, healthy boundaries are really helpful in our lives, but in order to set them, you need to be able to speak up. So I think we have to first understand what are the things that you need to talk about that maybe you're not talking about. So let's do an inventory on where you're feeling resentment in your life. Where are you doing things you don't want to be doing? Where are you not speaking up and telling the truth? Are you holding on to what I'm calling crystallized resentment? Or even just fresh resentment will do as well. I'll give you a little inventory that you can do in the guide, but I just want you to think about where might you be harboring resentment? Because before we can speak up and step up, we need to really understand, where are we not, right? Where are we actually self-abandoning in our relationships? Because that is a lot of what's happening when you're not speaking up, is that you're prioritizing someone else's thoughts, feelings, desires, what someone else wants to do. And again, you guys always know, I'm never talking about like we should never compromise, it's my way or the highway, because that's not healthy either. But I feel like if you are a high-functioning codependent, and even if you're in recovery because you got this awesome book and you're reading it, or you're in the TCM, which is Terri Cole membership, because I'm walking you through that right now and there's still something, like we still don't want people to be mad at us. Right? There's still an urge, even when you're in recovery, for people to like us. And it can still be scary to speak up, but you absolutely can do it. I think another thing that comes into play when we're sort of not speaking up is positive projection, which I've talked about before, but we have this tendency. So like when you're not speaking up, let's just say you get home from work and you're friggin' exhausted and you feel like it's all over your face, but your partner's like, hey, what are you thinking about? What's for dinner? As if it's on you. And in your mind, you're like, can't they see I'm in a coma? Like it's so obvious, like clearly I'm exhausted. So rather than speaking up, we want them to read our minds. We want them to intuit how we're feeling. And in that scenario, depending on the relationship, the fix could be as simple as saying, you know what, babe, I've had a super long day. Can you please just figure out dinner? And in a healthy relationship, the person will probably say, sure, we'll order in. I know what you like to eat, fine. But again, in our minds, especially when you're HFC, it's easier and faster and almost more comfortable for us to judge other people. It's like the friend who keeps you on the phone forever. You see their name on your phone and you're like, crap, I don't even want to pick up, right? And you're like, don't they know? I mean, I just said I just got home from work. I'm exhausted. How could they keep talking? That's the wrong question. That just keeps us stuck in this inaction because their reasons are their reasons, and that is their side of the street completely. Your reasons, right, are your reasons. You need to go, okay, what do I need to do in this scenario? What do I need to say? I need to hang up the phone. I need to say, if I have a friend who doesn't, and I say I really have to go, and they just keep talking, I'm like, okay, I'm hanging up. I will talk to you tomorrow or the next day or whenever it is. Like, I will actually just follow through now. Of course, not 20 years ago when I was, or 25 years ago when I was still super actively codependent. I couldn't do that, but I would be seething. I would be so mad. Like, how do they not know? Like, how self-absorbed are they? Again, we jump to judgment because it's quicker. And if you guys read the book, I talk about this in the book where we're yucking all the time as HFCs, meaning approving, disapproving, judge, other people, other things, other situations, because again, it creates this illusion of control, but it doesn't help you. So if you identify with that, we're going to move away from the judgment and the making assumptions and assuming that people can read our minds. And we're going to move into actually saying the thing. And anyway, back to positive projection. The point of that is in the judgment, we think everyone is like us. So we will project our positive qualities onto other people, even though we don't necessarily know that they possess those qualities. So that's what positive projection is about, meaning we need to give people a chance to let us know who they are. And then when they show us who they are, we need to believe them rather than assuming that they are like us. Okay, moving into steps that you can take to just shift out of this experience of expecting people to read your mind and not speaking up. I want you to look at your side of the street. What is your 50%? And as you're sort of going through and doing the relationship or resentment inventory, because that'll tell you where you need to speak up, really look at your own half of the equation. Like, what do you need to do? In the scenario with the dinner where the person comes home resentful that their partner isn't clued into the fact that they're too exhausted to like make dinner or whatever, what does that person need to do? Speak up exactly as I said, right? They need to ask for what they need, assert their desire. Because again, maybe your partner in a busy day, maybe they're lost in their own head, who knows? But instead of just being mad that they're not intuiting or that they can't read your mind, speaking up gives them the opportunity to step up, And then in the guide, I'm giving you some scripts as well. And you can just ask for what you need so easily. I don't mean it's easy, I mean it's simple. Saying, I'd like to make a simple request. Right? And I'll give you a bunch of those in the guide. It's also important to practice saying what you need and setting boundaries out loud before you actually do it in your relationships. And this may sound weird. And when I've done it myself, it feels a little weird. You're like literally talking into a mirror. But getting the words in your body, there's two things that it does. One, it makes it easier to say it when you need to say it. But the most important aspect of this is that it discharges emotion. Right? When we go through it and actually say the words of setting a limit with someone or saying no or asking to get our needs met, let's say, there's emotions that come along with that. And what we don't want to be is sort of overwhelmed in the moment by our own emotions, right? Because that can like trip us up with what we're saying, or if we start crying, especially if it's a business thing, you certainly want to make sure that you've discharged all of that emotion so that your emotions are not running you over like a bus in the middle of a meeting. And it feels good to like get the words into your body. And then you have to think about if you finally do speak up with some people, especially your long-term relationships, you may have to say it more than once, right? You may need to say, hey, remember the conversation we had last week about this? This is the same thing. You may need to remind them, and listen, there has to be a limit, of how much you're going to do that. And if the person reveals to you that they're either unwilling or incapable of meeting you in the middle, right? We're not looking for perfection from anybody because we're not perfect. Nobody is. But if you really get that there is not a willingness for them to care about how you feel, because that's really what we're talking about, then you have other decisions to make, right? Then you might move to really coming to the realization that the relationship isn't working for you. But we don't know that unless we actually have the conversations. We don't know that unless we actually tell people how we feel or what it is that we want. I think that there's really something painful about the assumptions that we can make when we're not getting our needs met. It's so easy to just slip to an assumption of like, well, the person just doesn't care, or that they're just not that into me, or they just don't value me, or they think I'm unimportant. And so much of the time, they're just unaware. Like some people are they can't read a room. They're just tone deaf. Some people really are. And so the part of us that wants our needs to be met sort of spontaneously and without us asking to get our needs met, that's the part that's super resistant to telling the truth. And yet, what's more important is you getting your needs met and you being seen, heard, and known. So I invite you to sort of get over the fear of doing it. Like literally just start. And we start with low priority people, right? Don't start with your hardest relationships and don't start with your most important relationships. Start doing it in lower, like less important relationships. It could just be people that you're interacting with in the world and see how it feels. I mean, listen, in our relationships, obviously it's also helpful to compassionately think about where our partner is coming from or what might be happening for them. But before we can do that, we have to get right with ourselves. We have to be honest with where we are. And again, going back to what I was saying at the top about rejection and fear, listen, this is a visceral fear. It makes sense. We are human beings. We are pack animals. If you think about it from a physiological point of view and a biological point of view, back in the day, cave people days, if you were kicked out of your group, you would die for sure. Like survival meant not being kicked out of the group. And so there's a very natural, and it is baked in to the human experience, fear of that. So we have to face that fear, because the thing is, not being friends with a particular person on the PTO or whatever it is, and the parent, in the parent group is not a life-threatening situation. And you don't have to be in relationships or friendships for the rest of your life if you don't want to. So I think we also have to really look at the level of fear we have and go, okay, this might be kind of amplified for what I'm actually talking about. And a lot of times, again, it's the little kid in you who's having this amplified fear. So talking to the little kid, doing some journaling, right? Having self-compassion is such an accelerator of our healing. And another thing that could be a massive accelerator for your healing is joining the new TCM, Terri Cole membership, if you have not. If you haven't even looked into it, it's for women. You can go to terricole.com/TCM. And if you like this conversation, if you like the way that my, content is out here in the world, the way that I answer questions, that's what we do 4 times a month in that group. And I also now have a special additional call per month just for helpers, healers, therapists, coaches, nurses, all of us in the healing arts, because there's a different amount of pressure on us in the healing arts. But anyway, I would love to have you check it out. If you feel like this is helpful to you, I think that would be super helpful. And it starts as low as $59 a month. And that also includes my 4 signature courses and so much more. So anyway, that's my pitch for TCM. Go to terricole.com/TCM. In the meantime, I really hope that this episode of The Terri Cole Show added value to your life. Let me know. You know where I hang out, mostly on Instagram. Take a picture of you listening, put it in your story, tag me, and I'll repost it. I really appreciate you guys being here. And as always, take care of you.